only 9 people were in that room. 9 people. And not one of them, not a single one, ever spoke about it publicly for over a decade. No cameras, no press, no record in any official archive. The footage, if it ever existed, was never released. The men who witnessed it signed nothing, said nothing, and carried it like a secret too heavy to share at a dinner table. What happened in that private gymnasium in Los Angeles in the winter of 1967 didn't make the newspapers. It didn't become a headline. It didn't even become a rumor until years later, whispered between fighters in back rooms, passed from trainer to trainer like contraband. But those 9 men, they knew. They knew they had seen something that couldn't be explained by weight class, reach, or athletic record. They had seen the laws of physics quietly humiliated. This is the story of the day Muhammad Ali walked into Bruce Lee's world and walked out a changed man. Let's rewind. Muhammad Ali was at the absolute peak of his mythological existence. He wasn't just the heavyweight champion of the world. He was the name, the face, the voice. He was poetry in motion, a man who moved like a featherweight and hit like a freight train. He was 6'3". He was 236 pounds of engineered destruction. He was loud. He was magnetic. He was terrifying. He was also, at this particular moment in history, politically radioactive. Ali had just refused induction into the United States Army. The boxing commissions had stripped his title. His passport was suspended. He couldn't fight professionally in America, couldn't travel internationally, couldn't compete. He was in legal limbo, surrounded by lawyers, facing a prison sentence, his career suspended mid-flight like a bird shot out of the sky. But Ali didn't sit still. He couldn't. Stillness wasn't in his blood. He trained, he sparred. He moved around Los Angeles, kept his body sharp, stayed in the company of athletes and artists and thinkers. He gave lectures at universities. He held court in gyms. He was restless and brilliant and searching. And somewhere in that orbit, the name Bruce Lee kept coming up. It wasn't a simple thing hearing about Bruce Lee in 1967 if you were Muhammad Ali. The mainstream world hadn't discovered him yet. He wasn't a movie star. He wasn't a household name. He was 26 years old, running a small martial arts school in Los Angeles, teaching a handful of private students, developing a philosophy of combat that had no name yet, no category, no belt system. He called it Jeet Kune Do, the way of the intercepting fist. But most people outside his tight circle had never heard those words. What they'd heard were stories, strange, unbelievable stories. A man who could throw a punch so fast it didn't register on camera. A man who'd been challenged by other martial artists and left them stunned within seconds. A man who weighed 135 pounds soaking wet, who had arms like cables and eyes like a hawk, who moved in ways that made trained fighters question what they thought they knew about the body's limits. Ali heard these stories, and Ali being Ali, curious, competitive, intellectually alive, he wanted to see it for himself. The meeting was arranged quietly, no fanfare, no press. A mutual friend, a Hollywood contact in the world that bridged entertainment and athletics, made the introduction. The location was a private gym's place in the Los Angeles area, the kind of place with no sign on the door and no strangers on the floor. The date, sometime in late 1967, the exact day remains disputed because none of the men present wanted it documented. 9 people total, Ali's trainer and 2 of his sparring partners, Bruce's closest student and one of his early Jeet Kune Do disciples, a film industry contact who'd helped arrange it, 2 other observers whose identities have never been confirmed, and 2 men at the center of it, Muhammad Ali and Bruce Lee. When Ali walked in, the room shifted. It always did. The man had a gravitational pull that wasn't theatrical, it was physical, like the air pressure changed. He was enormous in person, not just tall, enormous in the way that a person becomes when your body has been engineered for peak performance for 15 years. His shoulders were wide, his hands were massive. His presence was something you felt in your chest before he said a word. He looked at Bruce Lee and he smiled. Not a cruel smile. Ali wasn't cruel, he was theatrical, and what he saw in front of him activated the performer in him, the man who turned everything into spectacle. Bruce Lee was 5'7", he was 135 pounds. He was wearing a simple training top, dark pants, no shoes. He stood with his arms slightly loosened at his sides, his weight balanced on both feet, his face neutral. He wasn't performing calm, he simply was calm. There's a difference. You can spot a man performing serenity from 20 feet away. Bruce wasn't performing anything. Ali laughed, a genuine rolling laugh. "Man," he said, looking around at the room, "are you serious? This is the guy?" The room laughed with him, politely, nervously. His trainer chuckled, his sparring partners grinned. Bruce Lee didn't laugh. He looked at Ali, curious, quiet, studying, like a man who'd just been handed a very interesting problem. What happened next has been reconstructed from accounts given, years later, under different conditions, by 2 of the men present that day. The details align closely enough to be believed. Ali still grinned, spread his arms wide in his signature pose that photographers across the world had immortalized. He tilted his head. "Come on then, little man, show me what you got." It was a performance, but it was also a genuine invitation. Ali respected fighters. He tested them because that was the only language he fully spoke. He wanted to see what Bruce Lee was made of. Bruce stood still. He said very quietly, "You want to see fast?" Ali shrugged one massive shoulder. "Show me fast." There are moments before a physical demonstration that professional fighters describe as a kind of static in the air, a charge before lightning. Ali's trainer later described feeling it in that room, an inexplicable tingling, like the temperature dropped a degree.
Bruce Lee's trainer's trainer student, the Jeet Kune Do disciple who was present, described it differently. He said it was like watching a man who was standing in one place begin to become more present, more dense, as if Bruce was gathering himself from somewhere deep and internal and bringing it all forward without moving a muscle. Ali was watching him, and Ali, who had watched thousands of fighters in his life, who could read a man's intention before the man himself knew it, Ali stopped smiling, just for a moment, just a flicker. He'd seen something in Bruce Lee's eyes that he didn't have a word for yet. "All right," Ali said, his voice shifting, still light but no longer fully a joke. He dropped into a loose fighting stance, not committed, exploratory. "Let's see it." The room held its breath. Two of the observers stepped back instinctively. Bruce Lee moved.
Here's the problem with describing what Bruce Lee's speed looked like in person. Language was built for things that happen slowly enough to observe. Language was built for events with a beginning, a middle, and an end that the eye can track. What Bruce Lee's hand did in the next fraction of a second didn't have a middle. There was a before, there was an after. There was no middle. Later, years later, when the men present were asked to describe it, they used the same word over and over without coordinating their accounts. Invisible. The hand was invisible. What Ali's trainer said, "I was looking right at him, right at his hand, and I didn't see it move. I saw it leave, I saw where it stopped. I didn't see the middle." What the Jeet Kune Do student said, "I'd seen Bruce do it in training hundreds of times and I still couldn't track it, not once. In a room with perfect lighting, standing 6 feet away, I couldn't track it." Here is what happened. Bruce Lee threw what in Jeet Kune Do is called a straight lead. Not a jab, not a cross, not a conventional boxing punch, but a unique strike fired from the lead hand in a direct line, the entire body weight transferred in a chain from the floor, through the leg, through the hip, through the shoulder, through the forearm, into the fist, all of it compressed into a distance of inches. The technique was derived from fencing, from Wing Chun, from physics. Bruce had spent years engineering it to be the fastest thing a human hand could do. It stopped 1 inch from Muhammad Ali's jaw. 1 inch. The fist hung there, still, controlled. And Muhammad Ali, the man who had dodged Sonny Liston's combinations, who had made Joe Frazier's best shots miss by the width of paper, who had slipped and rolled and feinted against every variation of violence the heavyweight division had thrown at him, hadn't moved. Not because he chose not to, because he hadn't seen it coming. That was the detail that stunned the room. Not the speed alone. Fighters develop speed. Boxers have fast hands. That's known. What stunned them was that Muhammad Ali, hadn't flinched, hadn't reacted, hadn't tracked it. He stood there with Bruce Lee's fist 1 inch from his face, and his eyes were wide, and for 1 full second, 1 long, extraordinary second, the heavyweight champion of the world said nothing. The room was silent, completely, absolutely silent. Ali's trainer later said it was the only time in 15 years of working with Ali that he saw the man physically startled. Not scared, startled, the way a man is startled when reality briefly stops behaving the way he expected it to. Ali looked at the fist. He looked at Bruce. And then, slowly, carefully, like a man recalibrating everything he thought he knew, Ali said, "Do that again." Bruce pulled his hand back. He stood straight. The calm hadn't shifted. The expression hadn't changed. He did it again. And again, Ali didn't move in time, saw nothing. The fist stopped, this time at his chest. Then Ali grabbed Bruce's wrist, gently, the way a man handles something he's trying to understand, and held it there. He turned the fist over, looked at it, looked at the forearm, looked at Bruce's shoulder. Then Ali did something nobody in that room expected. He laughed. Not the rolling, theatrical laugh from earlier, a different laugh, quieter, almost private. The laugh of a man who has just seen something he'll be thinking about for the rest of his life. "Man," Ali said, still holding the wrist, shaking his head slowly. "Man." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. What followed was not a fight. It was not a spar. It was something closer to a conversation between two men who had both devoted their entire existence to understanding the body's limits, and who had each just encountered someone who had pushed those limits somewhere they hadn't considered. They worked together for the better part of 2 hours. Ali showed Bruce the shoulder roll, the way he absorbed incoming power by letting his body become fluid at the moment of impact, diffusing force across the surface of his body like water around a stone. Bruce showed Ali inch punch, the devastation that could be generated in negative space, in the explosive compression of power across a distance of almost nothing. Ali asked questions, genuine, specific, fighter's questions, not the questions of a celebrity humoring a smaller man.
The questions of a craftsman encountering a different craft. Bruce answered them without ego. He demonstrated. He adjusted. He showed the mechanics the way a mathematician shows a proof, step by step, visible, repeatable. At one point, Allie threw a combination at a pad that Bruce was holding. 3 punches, lightning fast, the kind of combination that had knocked men down in front of millions of people, and Bruce absorbed the impact, analyzed it, and then showed Allie something about the angle of the third strike that made the entire combination 40% harder to defend against. Allie stared at him. "How do you see that?" Bruce's answer, according to the man who heard it, "I don't see it. I feel the geometry." They feel the geometry. As the session wound down, one of Allie's sparring partners, a large man, a professional boxer, made a comment, casual, edged with the competitive instinct that fighters carry like a second skin. He suggested, not quite as a joke, that Bruce Lee's speed was impressive for his size. The words hung in the air. Bruce didn't respond immediately. He looked at the man. Then he walked to the center of the floor, stood in front of the heavy bag, and threw a single kick. One kick. The bag, a heavy bag, filled with sand and leather, weighing somewhere between 70 and 80 pounds, swung back so hard it hit the wall. Not swayed, not moved. Hit the wall. The chain it hung from went taut and snapped back, and the bag spun on its axis. The sparring partner didn't make another comment. Allie watched the bag still swinging, and looked at his trainer with an expression the trainer later described as the look he gets when he's storing something away forever. Before they left, Allie and Bruce stood together for a moment near the gym door. What was said between them, privately, away from the others, was never repeated publicly by either man. What is known, Allie referenced Bruce Lee in a 1975 interview, unprompted, when asked about the fastest thing he'd ever seen. He said, and this is documented, "I've seen fast, I've been fast, but I've seen something I couldn't explain, and I'll leave it at that." He smiled when he said it. The journalist assumed he was being philosophical. He wasn't. He was remembering a fist he never saw move. The 9 people in that room scattered back into their separate lives. No press release, no announcement, no social media. The concept didn't exist. The story moved the only way stories moved in that world, slowly, through trust, between people who had been in rooms like that and understood what they'd witnessed. For years, it was nothing but a whisper. You hear about the time Allie met Bruce Lee in that gym. Come on, that's not real. The man who told me was there. He was in the room. What happened? A pause. Always a pause. The kind that comes before something that sounds impossible. Allie asked to see it again.
Whispers don't die. They travel. They change shape, pick up weight, gather detail as they pass from mouth to ear to mouth again. Sometimes they become myths. Sometimes they become legends. Sometimes, rarely, but it happens, they become something closer to truth than the official record ever manages. The story of that Los Angeles gymnasium moved through the world of fighters the way all real stories move, underground, unsanctioned, passed between people who had skin in the game. Trainers told other trainers, fighters mentioned it in passing to promoters. A stuntman who worked in Hollywood heard it from a boxer who'd heard it from someone connected to Ali's camp. A martial arts instructor in San Francisco heard a version of it from a student who'd trained briefly under one of Bruce's early disciples. By 1969, there were at least 4 distinct versions of the story circulating in closed circles. In one version, Ali and Bruce actually sparred, full contact, controlled, and Ali couldn't land a single clean strike in 20 minutes of effort. In another version, Bruce demonstrated the 1-inch punch on Ali's chest, and Ali stumbled backward 3 steps. In a third version, Ali threw a jab, and Bruce slipped it so completely, so effortlessly, that Ali laughed until he had to sit down. None of these versions are confirmed, but here is what makes them worth examining. Every single version ends the same way. Ali, humbled, not defeated, never defeated, because this was not a fight, and Ali was never a man who could be simply defeated, but humbled in the specific and rare way that only happens when someone encounters something genuinely beyond their experience. The champion encountering the ghost, the immovable object sitting down quietly in the presence of something it couldn't categorize. That consistency, across versions that differ in every other detail, suggests something true at the center. Here is the thing about Bruce Lee that most people miss when they argue about whether he could really beat this fighter or that fighter, whether his techniques would really work in a cage match, whether his movies made him look better than he was. They're asking the wrong question. Bruce Lee was not trying to be the best fighter in the world. He was trying to understand what fighting was. There's a profound difference. His notebooks, and he filled dozens of them, dense with handwriting, diagrams, philosophy, poetry, training notes, observations, reveal a mind that was never satisfied with mastery as an endpoint. For Bruce, mastery was just the beginning of the real question. The real question was always, why does this work? What is the principle beneath the technique? Strip away the style, strip away the tradition, strip away the name and the lineage. What remains? What remains is physics. What remains is geometry. What remains is the body's relationship with time.
This was Jeet Kune Do, not a style, not a system, a method of inquiry, a commitment to asking the question honestly, even when the honest answer contradicted everything you'd been taught. Bruce had studied Wing Chun under Ip Man and then questioned Wing Chun. He'd studied Western boxing and absorbed its footwork, its rhythm, its economy of motion. He'd studied fencing, actual fencing with an ipe, because he recognized that the straight lead, the weapon fired from the front hand in a direct line, was the fastest possible path between 2 points. He'd studied wrestling, judo, savate. He consumed everything and kept only what survived contact with reality. He called it using no way as way. He meant, don't let the container become more important than the water. Don't worship the style at the expense of the truth. This is what Ali recognized that day in the gymnasium. Not just speed, not just power. He recognized a mind operating behind the body, a consciousness that had interrogated its own craft down to the atomic level and rebuilt it from first principles. Ali had done something similar in boxing. His refusal to fight flat-footed, his decision to keep his hands low and move his head instead, his development of the rope-a-dope, none of these came from convention. All of them came from Ali asking, what if the rules are wrong? What if the received wisdom is just comfortable habit? What if I think about this differently? Two men who had independently arrived at the same fundamental insight from completely different directions. That's what that gymnasium held. That's what the silence after the invisible punch was about. Recognition. Muhammad Ali did not speak publicly about that day for years, but people who were close to him, training partners, friends from that period, noticed something in the months that followed, a quality of attention he brought to discussions of speed, a particular stillness that came over him when someone mentioned Bruce Lee's name at a party or a precedent. Not reverence exactly, something more personal than reverence, something closer to the feeling a man carries when he's encountered the outer edge of his own understanding and hasn't fully processed it yet. Ali's trainer, the same man who'd watched the fist stop 1 inch from Ali's jaw, gave a single interview in the mid-1990s near the end of his life to a small martial arts publication with a circulation of a few thousand. In that interview, buried between questions about Ali's training regimen and his dietary habits, the trainer said the following: Muhammad saw things clearly. He always did. He saw that man that day and he understood something he couldn't put in words. I saw it on his face. He was trying to figure out where to file it, because there was no file for it. No file for it. That's the phrase that matters. Ali had a file for everything. Heavyweight, cruiserweight, brawler, boxer puncher, southpaw. He'd foot them all, studied them all, developed responses for them all. His mind was a library of patterns. Bruce Lee had no file. He didn't fit the taxonomy. He wasn't a martial artist in the way Ali understood martial artists from movies and demonstrations. He wasn't a boxer. He wasn't a wrestler. He was something that existed in the gaps between categories, something the existing tiling system hadn't accounted for. And that, for a mind as organized and competitive as Ali's, was the most interesting thing in the world. Bruce Lee died on July 20th, 1973. He was 32 years old. He had made 4 martial arts films. He had completed Enter the Dragon, the film that would introduce him to the entire Western world, just weeks before he died. He had filled dozens of notebooks. He had trained hundreds of students, privately, selectively, with an intensity that those students would spend the rest of their lives trying to describe. He left behind a philosophy and was simultaneously a martial art, a system of physical training, a meditation on the nature of combat, and an argument about the relationship between mind and body that academic philosophers are still working through 50 years later. He weighed 130 pounds at the time of his death. He had, in his brief lifetime, been dismissed, underestimated, mocked, and tested by men who outweighed him by 100 pounds or more. None of them walked away unconvinced. Not one. This is the thread that runs through every story about Bruce Lee's real confrontations, not the movie fights, the carefully choreographed cinema, but the actual moments of physical encounter that happened in gyms and schools and private rooms. The thread isn't just that he was fast, though he was. It isn't just that he was strong, though he was, in ways that defied the logic of his frame. The thread is the aftermath, the stunned silence, the shaking of heads, the men who'd come in with smirks and left with something else entirely in their eyes. Ali called it something I couldn't explain. A Jeet Kune Do student who trained with Bruce for 2 years called it the feeling that you just watched someone bend a rule you didn't know was a rule. A Hollywood stuntman who worked with Bruce on a film set called it the moment the room gets very, very quiet.
People think speed is about muscles. They think if you train fast twitch fibers, if you do the right drills, eat the right things, build the right explosive power in the right chains, you get fast. And you do. That part is real. But Bruce Lee's speed was something beyond that. The people who studied him most closely, not the fans, not the myth makers, but the biomechanics researchers and sports scientists who came later and analyzed footage frame by frame, they found something unusual. His speed wasn't just in the execution, it was in the decision, the time between the stimulus and the response, the gap between seeing an opening and filling it. In most fighters, even elite fighters, this gap is measurable. It's the delay between the eyes and the hands, between the brain's signal and the body's answer. In Bruce Lee, this gap was almost non-existent. Researchers who analyzed footage of Bruce's demonstrations clocked his punches at speeds that were, in some cases, faster than the human eye's ability to perceive motion at normal frame rates. But the more significant finding was the decision speed, the moment of initiation. The punch didn't just travel fast, it started fast. It began in a different place than other punches began, closer to pure instinct than conscious command. He had, through years of obsessive training, collapsed the distance between thought and action. He had made the decision and the execution simultaneous. This is what Bruce meant when he said, "Feel the geometry." He wasn't being mystical, he was describing a real cognitive state,
a condition where the body has internalized the physics of combat so completely that the conscious mind steps back and allows something faster and more precise to take over. Athletes call it being in the zone. Martial artists call it mushin, empty mind. Bruce called it being water. Be like water making its way through cracks. Do not be assertive, but adjust to the object, and you shall find a way around or through it. Water doesn't decide to flow around a rock. It just flows. The decision and the action are the same thing. That's what Ali encountered in that gymnasium, a human being who had practiced his craft until the space between thinking and doing had closed, a man who had become, in the truest possible sense, his own technique. There's a question that serious students of Bruce Lee always arrive at eventually. It's not, could he beat Ali? That question misses the point entirely. Ali was a heavyweight champion. Bruce was 130 pounds. They weren't in the same weight class, weren't competing for the same thing, weren't even playing the same game. The question is a category error. The real question is this: what kind of person dedicates their entire life to mastering the body's potential, not for fame, not for money, not for trophies, but purely because the question of what the human body can do is the most interesting question they've ever encountered? Bruce Lee was 32 when he died. He had not yet peaked. By his own account, by the account of the people who trained with him, he was still developing, still asking the question, still refining, still cutting away, still finding the next layer beneath the current one. What he would have become with another 10 years is a thing the world will never know. What he left behind is enough. His notebooks became books. His philosophy became a foundation. His films became the template for every action sequence made after 1973. His training methods, once dismissed as eccentric, as obsessive, as not serious, became the blueprint for modern MMA conditioning, for athletic cross-training, for the integration of philosophy and physical practice that elite athletes across every sport now take for granted. He was right before the world had the language to confirm he was right. That's what the greatest ones always are. In 1975, 2 years after Bruce Lee's death, a journalist asked Muhammad Ali a wide-ranging question about athletes he admired, across all sports, all disciplines, any era. Ali gave his usual answer. The names were expected, the charm was expected. And then at the end, unprompted, Ali added one more name. He said it quietly, a different register from the rest of the interview. There was a man I met once, small man. I won't tell you everything about that day, but I'll tell you this. I'm the greatest, and I know I'm the greatest. And that day I met someone who made me want to go home and think harder. The journalist asked who he was talking about. Ali smiled, that private smile, not the showman's grin, the other one. You already know, he said. And he moved on. 9 people were in that room. 9 people saw what the cameras never captured and what the history books never recorded. They saw 2 of the greatest physical minds of the 20th century stand 3 feet apart in a quiet gymnasium in Los Angeles, and they saw one of them throw a punch so fast that the other, the man who had never been truly startled, the man who could read a heavyweight's combination before it formed, the man who had made the entire sporting world look slow, didn't see it coming. They saw Muhammad Ali asked to see it again. They saw him study it the way a student studies something he doesn't yet understand but knows he needs to. And they saw Bruce Lee, calm, quiet, unhurried, show it to him one more time. Because that's who Bruce Lee was. He wasn't trying to prove something to Muhammad Ali. He wasn't performing. He wasn't competing. He was sharing. He was saying, in the language 2 extraordinary physical minds share when words aren't precise enough, here is what I found. Here is where the question leads. You asked. I'm showing you. The fist, the inch of space, the silence after. That's the real record of that day. Not a trophy. Not a title. Not a winner. Just a room that got very, very quiet, and stayed that way for longer than any of the 9 people expected. They thought size was power. They weren't wrong, but they never accounted for the man who made power irrelevant. Bruce Lee didn't beat Muhammad Ali that day. He did something rarer. He made the greatest fighter in the world want to learn. If this story moved you, if you felt something in that silence, in that gymnasium, in that 1 inch of space between a fist and a face, then you already understand why this channel exists. We don't tell history, we find it. The stories that didn't make the newspapers, the moments that happened in rooms with no cameras, the truth that moves underground for decades before it surfaces. There are more stories like this one, more rooms, more silences, more moments where the world shifted and nobody was watching. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Hit the bell. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And remember what Ali knew when he walked out of that gymnasium. The most dangerous person in any room is never the loudest one. It's the one you didn't see move.